why is it that the ones who are in charge of us and who are responsible for us and who are supposed to be protecting us do not accept any feedback, do not accept any criticism, and sometimes not even any request that's inconvenient?
You actually likened the treatment of women in some of our communities to female infanticide.
Yes.
I just imagine a man saying to his wife, part of your iman is expressing a willingness to be abandoned by me. You got to be ready for that now. You got to be ready for that now. Welcome to Beni Adam. Come on in. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Welcome to Tell Me a Story. And before telling you what Tell Me a Story is, I want to give you a sense of the genesis of this idea. I would often sit down at the dinner table and my children would say, "Dad, tell us a story." Now, sometimes I would tell them and sometimes I wouldn't tell them. But I started thinking about the centrality of stories to our experience. There's no perhaps greater evidence of the centrality of stories to our experience than the fact that the Quran is called Ahsan al-Qasas, the best of stories. So this is Tell Me a Story. It's a platform upon which we intend to elevate and highlight Muslim difference makers, and just help people connect with each other through stories. We want this to be a platform of connection, relatability, relevance, and a bit of intellectual intrigue. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Today, my guest is a prolific author. She's authored over 50 books, including short stories, novels. She writes on self-help. She has been an educational consultant for Macmillan Education. She lived in Egypt and Saudi Arabia, where she studied Arabic, Quran, tafsir for over 15 years. And currently, she teaches at the UmmZakiyyah or UZ Heart and Soul Care Community, where she offers a class called Feminine Soul Reset. She is Zakiyyah. She is my guest today. We are honored to have her at Beni Adam at the space. When I read this bio, and it said an author of over 50 books, I paused and said to myself, now for me, writing a 1,000 word blog post is torture. Who has the spine to sit and write 50 books? That's Zakiyyah. So 50 books, man.
I stopped counting. I know it's more than that. But yes. But as we talked about earlier, I'm addicted to pain, so that's part of it. No, that's a joke, y'all. Okay, but no, it's how I express my heart. Mm-hmm. I've been writing since I don't even remember. I don't have any memories of learning how to read or write. My earliest memories are writing and reading, and since I was a child, that's how I was able to express myself in the world. I find that writing is a lot easier than dealing with real humans in real life, so that's probably what happened.
So Zakiyyah, tell me a story.
I got a couple of them. Let's see. One of them I remember when I was in Saudi Arabia. A couple of them happened in Saudi Arabia. One of them was I had met up with this sister who had become Muslim, and she had married a brother who was a family friend of ours, and she had just become Muslim. Well, no, she had been Muslim about 5 years, and I was talking to her, saying, like, tell me, like, what are some of the things that stick out to you about being Muslim? And she said the main thing she's learned in these 5 years, and she was a lawyer before she became Muslim, and she said the main lesson I've learned is, like, if you look at your life and you ask yourself, are you happy? And if the answer is yes, then you're doing haram. You're. Wow. Yeah. So she was like, oh my God, And then I was like, and we laughed, but she was for real, And I would say, and another thing that sticks out to me when I was in Saudi Arabia, and it was a bit not as lighthearted, was something I'll talk about in the beginning of the book, is I went to a Quran school for hifz, and one of the girls there was saying she's so happy to be there, and because in her country the girls are not allowed to read or write, and she was from Afghanistan. And I was just like, what? Not even the Quran? And she was like, no, not even the Quran, because it's not needed for marriage. And that really just broke my heart. And so she and her husband basically escaped, came to Saudi Arabia so they could learn, so she could learn. And I'd asked, like, well, why couldn't you learn in your country if your husband supported you? And she's like, because he would get in trouble. Because any man who's found to be supporting women, they're gonna pay for that.
Now, I know you first and foremost. Initially, I was introduced to your work through your novels. I knew, and even then, I thought it was dope. I thought,
okay, alhamdulillah.
Mashallah.
Dope.
Yeah,
no.
I thought it was dope. Just the fact that you were a passionate novelist.
Yeah.
Right. I would see, there was just a lot of titles that were associated with your name, but this book is not a novel. It's autobiographical in that you've lived some of the content of the book.
Yes.
But it's not a novel.
No.
This is passionate advocacy for women.
Yes.
What motivated you to write this book?
My own journey, if I'm being 100% honest. I almost left Islam because of feeling like I didn't belong. I honestly got to the point where I felt like maybe I misunderstood my religion all along. Maybe this is a religion that's not really for me. Like, it wasn't, like, these were the questions at that time. I was like, maybe women don't have the right to exist. Maybe women don't have the right to anything. And before I knew I would write this book, I had gone to therapy with an imam who was also a psychotherapist. And throughout that, I had shared certain things. And then one of the things I had shared was that one of the things I held on to, and at that time I was kind of wondering, should I ever get married again? And I had said that one of the things that's very important to me now, if I were to ever get married again, was to put in my contract that I can decide what fiqh opinion I follow. And he was so angered by that. And he said that if any man who gives up that, he said the entire purpose of qawama is for a man to make those type of decisions.
I don't want to leave terms untranslated.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So you said your fiqh, you wanted to follow your own fiqh opinion, so you mean your own opinion in Islamic law, in terms of what you believe to be God's will.
Yeah, I would say, instead of my own opinion, I wanted to follow the opinion amongst the scholars that has been passed down that I truly believe to be correct.
Okay.
And in fiqh, and when you have these differences of opinion, everyone has their evidences, but we won't really find out until the day of judgment who's right. And one of the most popular examples of that is that the hijab displaying the face and hands, and then some scholars will say, no, she also has to cover her face, things like that. And then the extent to, for example, music is one of the most controversial ones, where how strict is the restriction? Is it nothing at all, or is it, just be careful, things like that. So I was saying those things are for me to decide, because I knew from my spiritual crisis that when you let go of the right to make the decisions for your own soul, whether that marriage works out or not, you got to carry the results of that for the rest of your life. Mm-hmm. So what really shocked me was for him to say, and he used the word like abdicate. Mm. He would be giving up like his whole, it's almost like this man is the king of his house. Mm. And if he gives that up, that's Allah. It's like Allah gave him an assignment and he's just throwing it away.
So you could almost hear in that your soul is a part of his domain.
Exactly. That's exactly what it meant. And that was crushing. And it wasn't just the point of view. It was that this is a person who studied. This is a person who's not just studied in Islamic sciences, but also who is certified in psychotherapy. So you should know the implications of saying something like that. And when I pushed back, I think one of the most traumatic parts about it was how cruel he was. It was like, you're just mad because I don't agree with you. And, things like that. And it was really mean. And it wasn't just about, okay, you have a difference of opinion. It was like, girl, get out of here. Like, girl, bye. That was that type of energy. Like, you just want, and he said, it's your trauma that's making you think that this is right. And that kind of, and I didn't know that I would ever write this book, but I was crushed because I had gotten to the point where I had built myself back up. This was my first experience with therapy within the Muslim community, with a Muslim imam, a Muslim therapist who was also an imam, and it was just like I just felt like he was just crushing me under his foot.
So I want to go back a little bit because we're talking about the book. We haven't properly introduced the book.
Oh yes.
The name of the book is "But Do You Feel Safe with Him?" Right?
Yeah.
Do you feel safe with him? First, talk to me about what is emotional safety. Now in the title, I think, now correct me if I'm wrong, do you feel safe with him? What you intend here is, as a wife, do you feel safe with your husband?
Yes, that would be the one layer. Like, and then, and if you look at the subtitle, 10 reasons why performing femininity never works in love. However, there's also an element of it where do you feel safe with any of the male leadership around you?
Okay.
And even one sister was like, she was like, can you say, because she took it as, do you feel safe with Allah? And I was like, ooh. I said, you know what? I didn't intend that. But if I'm being 100% honest, during my own spiritual crisis, the way Islam was taught, I didn't feel safe with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because of those types of things like that Imam has said. It's like, I was blocked from Allah. Like, it's like, you don't have a right to be here. And I had to build that back up inside of myself. Now, the title does not mean that. But the fact that someone took it that way, I said, well, to be honest, that's one of the side effects is when you continuously don't feel emotionally safe or spiritually safe, you ultimately think maybe this is what Allah wants. And now that's my journey. That's not everybody.
Now, I don't want to say too, as a man approaching this book, because I read this book and I benefited greatly, from the book. I had to make sure that I was safe in that the knee-jerk response was to be defensive. The knee-jerk response was to say, I know men and they aren't like that. I think you're imputing a malicious intent to brothers. I think that one of the things, and I'll let you elaborate, one of the things that you said to me in the lead up to this interview was, if men could focus less on the delivery mechanism, how we're saying, what we intend, and just focus on using this as an impetus, using this as a motivation to become better men to the women in their lives. Not hearing this as something that is discrediting them or undermining them, but something that is challenging them, but they shouldn't run from challenges.
Absolutely. And I think for me specifically, I would challenge men or just request, because you know what? Y'all know yourselves. Y'all gonna do whatever y'all gonna do. But for those men who are interested in just taking a pause, instead of worrying about what my intentions are, and instead of worrying about what I intended, if this came across your attention, then Allah wrote that for you over 50,000 years before you were here. So what does Allah intend for me by letting me learn this? What is the challenge that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given me by letting me hear this sister's story, another sister's story? Is this a challenge from Allah versus is this a challenge from this woman?
Welcome to Beni Adam. I'm Ubaydullah Evans. We are a luxury consignment lounge in the Pilsen section of Chicago. We opened about a year ago, and our intention behind creating this space was to bring people together, giving them an opportunity to trade things that they covet, trade things that are special to them, but also share some experience. So it's not just a retail location, it's more of a kind of a retail location and a lounge. So we're really excited about this space, and we invite everybody to, come in. Something that you said also as we were just kind of preliminarily preparing to converse today is that you have a hard time squaring this deference that men are supposed to be shown with the fragility that men display when they're criticized.
Yeah, or even just requested something. And that's hard for me. And a lot of women, a lot of my clients, I honestly, almost all the women I've ever spoken to about this topic all over the world say the same thing, is that why is it that the ones who are in charge of us and who are responsible for us and who are supposed to be protecting us do not accept any feedback, do not accept any criticism, and sometimes not even any request that's inconvenient? And for me, that was a part of my spiritual crisis, because I was like, what is it? And I began to blame myself. Like, maybe there's something inside of us as women that is so terrible. And I'm just being honest and blunt. Y'all can cut out whatever you want. That's so terrible and horrible that Allah doesn't even want to hear from us, and that He doesn't even want the ones in charge of us to hear anything from us. And if we do, we're people of the hellfire because we're being ungrateful.
But there's Surah Mujadila. There's a whole surah in the Quran where Allah is responding to a woman that petitioned the Prophet ﷺ about how she was being treated.
I agree, and I can receive that now. But when you're in trauma and you keep appealing to the people who have the ability to help, and they turn you away, and the only time they pay attention to what you're saying is for those women who, for example, go and claim to be feminists, right? Now they want to analyze their words. Now they want to go pay attention, but to mock them, to slander them, to talk about how messed up they are. And that was really confusing. I don't identify as a feminist, and I don't think I ever will, because it just doesn't resonate with me. But I do understand why some sisters do it. It's their last attempt to hold on to their Islam. It's like, if I can hold on to one thing that proves that I matter, and then they hold on to that one thing, and then the men go and just kick it out of their hands.
One thing in this book that was, difficult for me to read was that you actually likened the treatment of women in some of our communities to female infanticide.
Yes.
Right now, for viewers, female infanticide was a practice in pre-Islamic Arabia where they would bury their daughters because usually out of fear that she would bring shame to their families. You said that the way that we're treating women,
it's leading to that,
likened to almost slowly burying them.
Absolutely.
Because we won't allow their true personhood to express itself.
Absolutely, because, and this isn't just my opinion, what I was actually expressing is that in order for a society to get to that point, it has to build up to that. That's not in the fitra. That's not in the nature of a human being to bury innocent children, male or female. So what had to happen is that you step by step bury their voices, make them unimportant, make it as if they don't matter, so that by the time you get to that next step, it's the next logical step. So in a figurative way, I think we're already there in many communities. Not all, but many.
So give me some sense of what it means for a person to have their personhood buried. Like women, like a practical example of what it would mean for a woman to, and I want to use two terms from your text, have her personhood buried or have to be relegated to a performative femininity. Okay. In which she's performing femininity, but her true personhood, right, her fullness has been, negated.
Okay, well, I'll start with one example. There was a sister who had come to me for advice, and she was having a lot of trouble in her marriage. And it took her a long time to get to the point where her husband would even agree to any sort of mediation or counseling, which is normal, whatever is happening in marriage. And it can happen on the other side too, if that's the one who's having the problem. But so finally they get in front of the imam, and she's about to express what her concerns are, whatever they were in her marriage. And the imam said, before we start, he turned to the husband and said, are you pleased with her? And he said, absolutely, I'm pleased with my wife. He said, this meeting is over. None of your concerns they don't matter. Because if he's pleased with you, you're a person of Jannah, so go. So I don't even know if you can, it's almost like coming to court. Like if you put a lawsuit against someone, and I don't like to use that example, but I'm trying to use an example that men can understand.
Are so litigious.
Yes, but if you had a concern and it took you a long time to even get that space, and then the judge comes and says to your employer, are you pleased with his work? And he says, absolutely. He said, okay, case dismissed. If your employer is pleased with you, then there's no case. So now you have to go back under those conditions, and you don't get any help.
One thing that I appreciate about your language is you don't
mince words.
You don't mince words. And you don't. I was gonna say you don't pull your punch.
Oh, okay.
But you were saying in the way that women have been taught to prioritize the male gaze, the male perspective, men's considerations of them. It can border on something that is like associating partners with God.
Absolutely.
That you reference at least 2 points in this book. You reference times when what men want, what men think, right, was given priority over even what God says.
Absolutely. And that actually, in response to an email I had written, there was a community leader, and I'm going to emphasize that because he wasn't just a regular brother in the audience. And to defend the other men, they totally disagreed with that happened, but this did happen. So, because I was asking after that incident happened with the email, I asked my audience, I said, what do you all think? I was like, do you think that a man can be able to decide and override a woman's fiqh opinion? And pretty much most of the brothers said they disagreed. They thought it was crazy. And even one brother had been raised by a Christian mother and a Muslim father, and he was like, how does that even work? But there was one brother who was a community leader who said that not only does the man have the right, that is the woman's job. Like, even if he's wrong, she has to listen. And even to the point where if he ended up taking her life, then she would go to paradise, and she should be willing to do that.
La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah al-azim. Now I'm supposed to be in like my cool interview mode. I'm here doing my best Black Charlie Rose impersonation, but that's absurd. That if he takes her life, she's supposed to be a martyr.
Yeah, he was saying that, and his proof was, he said that the two women that women need to emulate as they serve their husbands are Asiyah, may Allah be pleased with her, the wife of Pharaoh, and Hajar, may Allah be pleased with her, the wife of Ibrahim alayhi salam. So, but he didn't mean as a servant of Allah, he meant as a servant to the husband. And he was saying that the reason that the wife of Pharaoh had such a high status was because of her dedication to her husband, that she was willing to die than to go against him, because he ended up killing her. And then he also said that for Hajar, every woman needs to be willing to be abandoned by her husband and left alone and to raise the kids. He had a whole tafsir.
La ilaha illallah.
So now that's extreme. I'll acknowledge that.
Deadbeat hermeneutic. Got the deadbeat hermeneutics.
So now that is extreme. I don't think anyone would agree with that. But I'm pointing that out to say this is. I mean,
I'm sorry. We supposed to be, man. Look, we discussing this book, man. It's serious here, man. This ain't no game now.
Yeah.
No, but
but I joke a lot. So anyone who knows me and my audience, they know you gotta laugh to keep from crying sometimes.
I just imagine a man saying to his wife, part of your iman is expressing a willingness to be abandoned by me. You got to be ready for that, man. You got to be ready for that now, because you never know. I might drop you off somewhere and tell you, look, when I get back, I get back.
Yeah, he also said starved, like no food.
La hawla wala
So,
quwwata illa
because
billah.
he was saying that's what Abraham did. I was like,
But that leads me to a very important point. How much of this now? We're talking, and I don't. I'm sure these themes are universal in human communities. But how much of this do you think is related to kind of our particular experience? Because most of these anecdotes, are they from African Americans? Are they from people in urban environments? Are they from people of a particular religious orientation? What are we talking about here?
Well, the imam who made the initial statement, he was African American. The brother who had made that assertion, I believe he definitely was African American. I think he was Desi. I think he was Pakistani.
About the abandonment.
Yeah, abandonment. Yeah. But what's happening is that it's not about those extreme examples, because that's the one thing. It's kind of like when we were talking about, racism. Like, oh no, I have black friends, or I have friends that are women, or whatever. People say whatever. But what we don't realize is that in order to get to an extreme, minute things had to happen that looked innocent. And something as simple as, like men, one thing that a lot of men feel they have no problem is saying how a woman should dress. Now, I'm not saying there's a way that that you can tell your wife, but at a certain point, like, where's the line? Like, when you marry someone, for example, and this was my question even to the imam, if you are marrying a woman, didn't you already kind of get to a point where you all understand that you have a similar understanding or an acceptable understanding of Islam that you can both respect?
I encourage people to read this book. Right? I encourage people to read this book.
Yeah. Show them the book when you say it.
See, you do it. You do a little.
No. I'm saying so that I was helping them with the editing.
You do a little direct. Writer, novel, short stories, self-help, teacher, film director. But do you feel safe with him? This book challenged me in many ways, but these were excellent challenges. Yeah. Just thinking about if I was like sending my wife all kind of loving texts after I said, oh man, I said, but this book just on a visceral level just wants me to just forces me to ask, do you feel it? Are you? I love you, right?
Yeah. No, that's good. I'm glad.
But I encourage my brothers to pick this up. I encourage my sisters to pick this up. I have 2 daughters and a son, and making sure that we cultivate and foster a culture in which everybody can be authentic and grow in their relationship with God in that way. And not performative. You've given us, yet another tool that will help us in that direction.
Alhamdulillah.
So,
well,
God bless you. Thank you for coming on. It's been wonderful to talk with you. If you want to tell me a story, you can find me at tellmeastorymedia@gmail.com. Today, I've had the honor and the privilege of conversing with Zakiyyah, prolific author, teacher. She's creating, I think, a very, very interesting lane for men and women to, I think, find deeper understandings of what it means to be emotionally safe for each other and emotionally safe for ourselves. So check this book out when you get a chance.
Thank you for having me, first of all. I really enjoyed it, and I'm humbled and honored to be a part of this conversation. And thank you for reading the book. As I told you before, the fact that you opened to the first page after you saw the cover, I was like, lots of points there. May Allah bless you. But for those of you who are wondering where you can get the book now it's available for pre-order. This is the book. It's one of my babies. Yay. Okay, and it's available on Amazon for pre-order right now and other places. And it'll be coming out August 30th, this year, 2025. And If you're interested in Feminine Soul Reset, just go to sqsoul.com and you can join there. And if you're interested in contacting me, just write me at uzi@uziauthor.com and I'll be happy to respond.